We can. You see me, but you can hear me, right? You see and hear. Okay, there we are. Welcome everybody to our fourth webinar of this year. And sorry for the late starting of this event, but we had some troubles to resolve. But we are online now, and thank you so much for being here, everyone. This is our webinar. It's named "Believe and Make It Happen: Lessons Learned and Hot Tips to Make Evaluations Gender Responsive." Thank you so much for our presenters, Silvia Salinas and Svetlana Negroustoueva. And I'm going to pass the slides here. All right. Thank you. How to use it? I'm going to explain to you very quickly, if you are not familiar, how to use the virtual platform. Thank you, Svetlana. Just okay. So this is the Voice Boxer platform. You have several options to whether or not you are connecting from different places. We have different languages here. It's in we have English, Russian, and Spanish, French, and English in the arrow in the bottom of the page. You have if you prefer your selected language, you can hit the button, and the translators you will hear the translators speaking. And there's a group chat at the right column. When you can see the different messages, I encourage you to put your questions if you have some in this chat room, and we will, my colleagues and I, we will be collecting the questions that we will ask our presenters at the very end. I'm going to show you a very quick roadmap of the task force number 3. The initiative started in 2015. It was launched in Nepal, and the task force was created. Number 3 was created in that year, in the next year, in 2016. And as you can see, in 2016, December, in October, in 2017, we have the first virtual conference was in December 2 years ago. In October, we have our first webinar. In November 2017, we have our second virtual conference. And in January and February, and now in March, we've been having our webinar. So as you can see, this year has been very exciting, and we've been very busy putting this together for you. I want to show you very quick a little bit of the statistics of our event of today. Let me just get back to the so the mean age of the participants is 36. Can you hear me right now? Can you hear me? My microphone is on, so okay. Sorry. The mean age of the participants is 36, so it's pretty close to our focus of age, which is between 30 and 35. The mean years of experience in evaluation, it's 5 years. So the people in this webinar they have 5 years on average doing evaluation. So the main focus is the percentage of the people that are doing mainly evaluation is very high, with 73%, and 47% of them are part of ABOPE. So it's still it's close to the half, but one of our goals is to increase this number. 125 participants registered from all over these places. So it was the cohort that we made. It was on Monday, so hopefully there's more people now. I'm gonna thank Eval Partners for putting this, helping us putting this together, and of course our presenters, Silvia Salinas, and again Svetlana Negroustoueva. And without any further, the Eval Youth leadership, as of course, Bianca Montrose and Moorhead, Marie Gervais, and Khalil Bitar. And the task force number 3 leadership, the organization of the conference. It is José Arevalo, Sofia Esteves, and Antonina Rishko-Procenscu. So other members are here that I want to thank again. It's Daniel Ducay, Sarah Osmain, Imad Haroun, Gerardo Sanchez, myself, Ana Erika Larenza, Kelsey Chola. So join us and follow us in our social media. And without any further ado, I just want to apologize again for the technical problems and the delay, but I give the...
Greetings, everyone. Thank you for introductions and for acknowledgements. We're very excited to be part of the Eval Youth Learning series, and we're very happy that our collaboration has expanded and hopefully will continue. We definitely want to acknowledge the active role of Eval Youth within the EvalGender network, specifically Claudia Lavaria, Alexi, I don't remember his last name, but Alexi and some other members, and we definitely appreciate the patience and that the team has showed in helping us prepare to this event. We also, of course, want to thank Eval Partners for the overall leadership in this. As you can see from my slide, the title is actually different from what was on the previous slides. And as we go through the presentation, both myself and Silvia, you will understand why. And as some of you may know, and if for others who don't know, I'm happy to introduce you to EvalGender Plus, which is a network under Eval Partners, which focuses on promoting focus on gender equity and gender responsiveness and equity focus in evaluations, with a particular focus under SDGs. However, also beyond in everyday evaluation and monitoring work that you do. The initiative has 3 action areas: mobilization and advocacy, promoting innovation in evaluating with an equity and gender lens, and knowledge sharing. So hopefully, this part of knowledge sharing kind of track will help bring more members to us and will help you ensure that your evaluations are more gender transformative. As we move along, I will give kind of brief outline of my part, and then Silvia will talk about hers. So I already have discussed the Eval gender and the role of Eval Youth, and we definitely, it was very interesting to see the statistics, specifically that the age group and the level of experience that you have, that the participants have. So we definitely hope that this will be educational and will help you do your work differently and transform the agendas. I will talk about must-haves of gender transformative evaluation, the role of gender analysis, and a couple of, we'll discuss a couple of approaches and methods. Of course, we understand that, within the 15-20 minute window, we will not be able to teach you everything, but hopefully between myself and Silvia, who will talk about principles and issues and actual kind of hot topics that I'm sure all of you are interested in, we'll be happy to help at least set the ground for your further research and exploration. We understand it's not going to be a comprehensive picture. And the big point of this presentation is to help you think about those entry points in evaluation and your monitoring evaluation work, where you can insert this, the attention to gender, and where you can make your M&E activities gender transformative. There will be some repetition, but it will just further emphasize the importance of those certain elements. So if you would like to, if you would like to join us afterwards, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of giving some background here up front, you please join our Facebook group, our community of practice online, gender evaluation. We'll be happy to engage with you further. So why are we talking about this? Why is this important? I think the statistics that you have on your screen speak for themselves. And what is important about this slide is not just the kind of pure numbers, but the fact that those are indicators. And the role of indicators and monitoring in approach to gender transformative evaluation and gender transformative monitoring evaluation work is really important and cannot be emphasized enough. So what is gender transformative evaluation? There's no really kind of one size fits all definition. What is important is that the concept of gender transformative evaluation comes from feminist evaluation, feminist research in theory, rather than evaluation approaches and making them just gender responsive. This is something that I will cover a little bit further, but this is just kind of 5 elements I will cover now about what are the really kind of key characteristics. And you can also read more in the recently released publication, a resource pack on transformative evaluations, on gender transformative evaluations, published in India in 2016. And one of the members of EvalGender Plus, a board member of the community of evaluators of East Asia, Sonal Zaveri is a co-author, and she's a dear friend and dear colleague. So I encourage you, it's available online for free. So I encourage you to look at it. So one of the elements of the gender transformative evaluation, an important element, is the gender analysis. And that cannot be emphasized enough. And in my career, I have brought it to the bear many times in the context of evaluation. It really is an important important medium, which allows you to find information on the structural inequalities, the relations, access to resources and strategic gender needs, and intersectionality of problems and potential solutions. The use of the gender analysis documents are available widely online. A lot of donors have emphasized their development, so you can easily Google and find information for specific countries, for specific sectors. So there's plenty of information to consider, but it really should be considered, and because there are people who have done a lot of the analysis before. So whenever you think about gender transformative evaluation, please think that this is the really important piece. The questions. The questions, of course, the evaluation questions are really important entry point for ensuring that the evaluation is gender transformative. You know, often depending on where in the evaluation you might be positioned at any given time, there's always room to include sub-questions. There's always room to include more specificity. When, for example, the question says beneficiaries, you can do male and female beneficiaries. And there's also always usually space to use the elements of gender analysis that identify gaps and barriers to gender equality and the productive roles of women, men, and vulnerable populations. The data collection techniques and methods, appropriate data collection techniques and methods are also essential for ensuring the gender transformative nature of evaluation. You cannot expect that any regular method can, by default, will land you with findings that can really be transformative. So the attention to that is really important. The number 4 is the team composition for evaluation. Again, you might not have as much influence over that when you are are already approached to be an evaluation team member. However, if you're in a position of advocating for this, it's really important to include an expert in the team in gender and in the intersectionality of different sectors and gender experts who might not be evaluators. Unfortunately, there's never enough time, there's never enough resources. So looking for that balance of gender expertise and sectorial expertise is really important. Of course, the ideal it would be evaluator with gender responsive and gender transformative views and lens. Fifth important characteristics is ability to assess how the intervention program contributed to closing the gaps and achievements of results, improving the lives of women and men, those that had been identified in the gender analysis. So this is an obvious one. However, it sometimes gets forgotten at the end of the evaluations and in the formulation of findings, conclusions, and recommendations and thinking about strategic planning. It is a joint activity, and this figure of hands together hopefully helps understand that. As I said, I am a strong believer in the very big role of gender analysis in gender transformative evaluations and the knowledge and the background that it can provide in formulating questions, and selecting appropriate approaches, methods, and formulating recommendations. So that cannot be emphasized enough. There are other forms of analysis that can help with making evaluation gender transformative, socioeconomic analysis, some analysis that are done to ensure attention to safeguard issues for infrastructure projects. There are different entry points, but gender analysis is something that is just more widely used. And again, it's really easy to find those online. The kind of stepping a little bit back, in an ideal world, project design offers an important opportunity to identify and address gender gaps and make sure that project interventions are designed in a way to address them. However, there's also, at the end, there are sometimes expectations that, even if you're very experienced an evaluator with a gender transformative with expertise in gender transformative evaluations, a lot of times you really work with nothing if somebody did not do the diligence at the project analysis. However, if you're an MRE professional who is asked to bring your expertise into the development of the project, where you have an insight and opportunity to include questions to design a project with that lens, you are also very strongly encouraged to use gender analysis to help you identify indicators and measures. At the same time, as an evaluator at the inception phase, again, with the use of gender analysis, you can also help others understand the importance of looking at the gaps and trying to find entry points for the project to address. Gender analysis helps identify what we need to know and what are the possible gender gaps and barriers for project beneficiaries, project participants to fully have an impact, to fully feel the impact of the project and its effects. The answers, the gender analysis and integration matrix that is presented at on the slide is something that was developed, as I said, for project design. However, I think it can be really easily used by evaluators, irrespective of when they're brought into the project, either retracing back or helping design and adapt the evaluation approach and evaluation focus to consider those the gender dimensions, and hopefully which will bring the transformative nature of the project and will provide learning that can be transformative. Why the answers, the important questions to answer here would be what are the gender gaps? What are the barriers and opportunities, and what is the project's response to this? Again, even if that was not set up in the project design, there's always room to retroactively look back and see maybe unintentionally those were addressed, hopefully intentionally. Again, indicators are really important. Indicators do help to look at the statistics. They do help to look at the disaggregated data and provide room for evaluators to ask questions. Why and how is this helpful? And why is this happening? Why there's some differences between men and women? Why there's differences between men and women living in urban and rural areas, or indigenous populations and other vulnerable populations. Scoping is a really important phase of ensuring that gender transformative evaluations take place. Use of secondary data, sectorial data, data on gender equality documents for projects that actually address that, including donor gender strategies, because a lot of the evaluations are contracted by donors, especially in certain parts of the world. And a lot of them have to follow gender strategies. So this is really important because donors also have different approaches, different definitions of how they see the role of addressing gender and how far they push the envelope. The evaluation designs, the evaluation discourse should, once you have the scope of work in your hand, there are still opportunities at the inception phase to look at explore the project, the gender equality, women's empowerment context of the mission, goals and activities of the project. It is very interesting and important to look at the categorization of the beneficiaries. What is the project is trying to address, what they did address, and what were those gender differentials in them, and how the project categorizes them. So, including, the disaggregations. The objectives and interventions are very important to look at, and if there was any room for addressing them in the project, and what evaluation can uncover at this stage. And of course, the expected results. For example, if the objective of the project is building capacity of countries to use forest and terrestrial carbon monitoring and management methodologies and techniques, it would be important to look at what the existing capacities are, if there were any gender differentials, and how best those capacities should have been strengthened, in which modes, in which types of trainings, in which ways, mentoring, training, in which hours, in which facilities. So there's a lot of different ways that you can explore and dig deeper. For very important role again about gender sensitive evaluation questions and a lot of sub questions. That's where it's mostly easy to enter. So, for example, if the project, if the evaluation question is, has the project build capacity of key stakeholders, you can expand it to say including males and females. How differentiated were capacity building efforts? Were capacity strengthening strategies differentiated by gender, sex, and any other socioeconomic characteristics? In what ways can the project improve its approach, which is a pretty standard question? And, you can have a sub-question, what programs, design elements, and interventions should change to ensure that women and men benefit more equally from the project benefits. And the same about coordination and coordinating structures of the projects, which are pretty generic evaluation questions. Again, going back to the role of gender analysis, you can look if there were any issues related to structures and coordination that could have been affected by those gender gaps and include those sub-questions. So evaluation approaches and methods are, of course, kind of at the heart of this discussion, and the interventions that aim to address gender equality, issues of gender inequality and social exclusion are really complex. hence the evaluation approaches and methods that should be addressing them. Those interventions usually require change in policy level, institutions, communities, and at the individual agency level, all of which are complex in themselves, but in the together in the cumulatively they're even more complex when you bring the gender into this. Changing norms, changing gender norms is really hard. Those are societal norms that do not change overnight or in the life of a project. And changing minds and hearts of people is a long-term exercise. The evaluators as a gender transformative evaluator, the evaluator with a focus on that, you have to use the different methods, different approaches ranging from systems thinking, complexity evaluations, and being a feminist theory and research being at the heart of those, and impact evaluations because they provide a kind of lengthwise, they provide a bigger range, time range. The case study, participatory evaluations are really important. All of these are really, there's enough literature about this, so it's just finding entry points in a lot of those methods and approaches to bring the lens, the gender transformative lens. This is something that is really important. So you probably have heard about gender approaches, kind of in the general way, not gender responsive or gender transformative, but gender approaches. But as I said, the gender transformative evaluations, they come from feminist theory and research, and there are differences, and those differences are really important when designing evaluation and finding those entry points. The gender approaches just put together, they identify the gaps, just like gender analysis, but they don't necessarily help uncover why those are happening, and feminist approaches actually help to do that. They challenge the position when they know that the position is like that, when there is inequality. Feminist approaches to evaluation and to research, they challenge those positions and attempt to strategically affect lives and improve them for the better. Men and women are seen as equal in gender approaches, whereas within feminist approaches, there are differences within women. The women can also be rich and poor, urban, rural, educated and not educated. So those things are really kind of dig deeper within feminist approaches. And feminist approaches look specifically at the advocacy as an important aspect of evaluation, and that relates to data use, evaluation findings use. So it goes beyond the acknowledging of the problems, but it offers solutions. Those approaches offer solutions, and it challenges evaluators to be reflexive, because evaluators have to have those values that help them push that envelope further. What is the same is that they look at the relations between women and men, the roles and status that they would consider, the intended outcomes of program and project activities, how those affect women and men differently, and they consider gender indicators that they're based on analytical frameworks. And indicators by themselves are not sufficient to allow for deep exploration. So they recognize the need to bring approaches and methods that would go beyond exploring quantitative numbers. This slide provides a kind of really, I think, succinct picture, a graph of feminist evaluation and the methods and the and approaches with which it intercepts. And it's something, feminist evaluation has a strong overlap with characteristics of other evaluation, and it can be used as a framework for you as an evaluator, or again, it can be used in different points of the evaluation to help integrate as much as possible and make the evaluation gender transformative and its findings gender transformative and ready for be picked up for advocacy. If you draw on or appreciate any of those methods and approaches, then feminist evaluation is something that you can use in your practice, because as you can see, for example, if you use utilization-focused evaluation, you link to feminist evaluation is inclusiveness at the evaluation design phase and at evaluation the findings formulation and use. The same with outcome mapping. As we know, there's a lot of literature on incorporating gender into outcome mapping. A lot of wonderful work has been done by CARE and some other organizations. So this is just to help you understand that this does not stand alone by itself, and the combination of approaches and methods is important because of the complexity of the problems. The principles, recently, I don't know how many of you heard, recently Michael Quinn Patton pioneered the concept of principle-focused evaluation. And as feminist evaluators and evaluators who should practice gender transformative evaluation, we wondered how those intersect, and we found that those intersect very well. And because a lot of the gender transformative evaluation based on feminist evaluation principles, and principles being the key word. Principles can and should be evaluated. We cannot say that all principles are correct. So the premise, the principle that go into the project design should be also a challenge. Principle-focused evaluation is particularly suitable for evaluating societal movements and dynamic situations and complex situations that for feminist evaluation and gender transformative evaluation focus on. And the question is, how does a principle guide action, and what happens because of that action? Those questions are key to the gender transformation and addressing gender barriers and gender roles, because a lot of problems and barriers and gaps come from principles and norms that people have. And the questions on the right are the kind of key points that Michael has formulated, kind of into principles, and to help make that link. And this last week there was a blog on AA365 where Michael and Donna Pottams put together a kind of more descriptive information about this. So I will just leave you with that. So just kind of last bits of information for me before Silvia takes over. Again, little but important elements as budget for integrating gender into evaluation, kind of past the approaches made before that, is that there should be funding, and it doesn't have to be a lot. But if you're in a position to influence that, please make sure that there is enough money to bring necessary expertise, to talk to the extra people, to go to an extra village, and that will ensure that the evaluation is more transformative than it would have been originally. Again, we talked about expertise. It's important, and I cannot emphasize that enough, that even some expertise is better than just the evaluation expertise by itself. And of course, the formulating findings and recommendations, not making one paragraph within the report, but having a specific finding related to how well or not the project has addressed the gaps maybe identified in the analysis, gender analysis, the conclusions that can be made cumulatively with other findings, and recommendations that can be later used, and including that in the executive summary, which is unfortunately something that usually most people read. And call to action: join EvalGender Plus, know those approaches, find entry points in your work to incorporate in gender transformative evaluation principles, and introduce approaches and methods that would help bring down the findings that respond to those to the principles, and spread the word. And we look forward to engaging with you. Thank you.
Svetlana, it's been a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for the very complete landscape of the different options, approaches, and methods that we as evaluators have available to combine and to mind always this very important perspective, the gender analysis, and all the intersectionalities and the intersections that we can combine in different with different methodologies as well. I think it was very important for us to get the big picture of the idea. Now I will pass the baton, or give the floor to our next presenter from Bolivia, Silvia Salinas Mulder, and sorry for not introducing Svetlana later on. Before, sorry, but Silvia is an anthropologist from Bolivia, and she will be the chair and coordinator of RELAC, and the Latin American Network for Professionals in Evaluation in Latin America. So thank you, Silvia. I'll give you the floor.
Hello, thank you very much. And well, it's really a pleasure, and I feel honored to be participating in this webinar together with Svetlana. And well, what I will share with you are some, well, guiding principles and practical issues, and also some, let's say, dilemmas and hot tips. And I think that they added to some concrete issues that I will, from my perspective and from my experience, share with you, trying to be quite practical, is also a view from the South. I must say that some of the issues I will talk more from my perspective as a woman from Bolivia, as an anthropologist and evaluator. So the first part is just you know, related to this, what I have called some guiding principles and practical issues. And I wanted to say that this was based on a presentation that I made in Anaheim, I don't know how many years ago, at the American Evaluation Yearly Conference. And this was a very important presentation, and this led to many things after that, just publishing and everything. So what I tried to do at that point, and I will try to do right now, is just to organize around some specific steps of the evaluation process and some specific issues, some like key advice and key warnings. So just this, what the title of the webinar is like related to belief and to make it happen. Is just both that personally I strongly think that gender and rights-based or principle-based evaluation have a strong connection to the heart, to the passions, to the commitments, and that, well, of course, then we need the technical capacity to make it happen. So make it happen and shock everybody or shock everyone. I really like that part. And with Fabiola Mariles, we always say that gender or feminist transformative evaluation has three pillars, which is the technical part, the ethical part, and also the political part. Also, Svetlana has talked a lot about the advocacy dimension, and we really think that it's an integrated component of feminist or gender transformative evaluation. Whoops. I would like to start with the first part of what it means, evaluation design. Sometimes we're just maybe hired as evaluation and the terms of reference are already set, but it's also very frequent that we can negotiate or we can discuss the terms of reference or transduce them as a work plan. So I think in the evaluation design phase, it is very important to go beyond the general and the obvious, to avoid the general, to go for specificities, to operationalize the values and the approaches. So just when people say, okay, do this with a human rights perspective or approach, what does it really imply? How will it look like when we do the evaluation? The second important point is that you have to make explicit your own assumptions and positioning to anticipate possible risks and reactions. We talk a lot about what does it mean, for example, for me, a Bolivian woman, when I go to a rural area, an indigenous area, I'll just automatically represent a class, automatically represent history, automatically represent many things. So I have to be very conscious about what I represent, but also about my own assumptions, even if I might say that I know the context. The third point is to address the issue of ethics. Ethics is personally for me a very, very important thing. I think there are several, there are ethical codes, several ethical commitments. When we sign for an evaluation, sometimes we get these ethical codes or documents, but I am not sure, or I'm a bit skeptical about how we really internalize those ethical principles and how do we really consider them during the evaluation process. The fourth thing is to include a strategy to penetrate and flexibilize the the intra and intergeneric power structure. So we really need to think, when we talk about knowing the context, we need to be aware, what does the context look like in terms of power structures, in terms of formal and informal laws and norms that rule the relations, the gender relations, but also other social relations that are interlinked with gender. The next important question is about who participates. I'm sorry, and I think one question is to analyze the positions, the interests, and influential power of the different stakeholders, not only their roles. Sometimes, especially when we say we need to go to a community, for example, and respect the roles and the authorities, well, usually those authorities are usually men. So we need to better understand the context and develop strategies to not only go by the rule. Okay, we have to interview the major, we have to ask his permission, but we also need to find creative ways to get to other people that are not representing, let's say, the community. It's important to identify relevant differences and inequalities between and within genders. As Svetlana said, we are women, but women are very diverse and also very unequal. It is important also to define a stakeholder mix from most powerful to most vulnerable, from leaders to excluded and marginalized people. And it is important also to see that men's experiences and perceptions are key from a relational gender perspective, and that it is important not to limit women's or men's voices to their own experience. We tend to sometimes to address people like only to talk about themselves, but it's very important also to address people, to ask them for their more general knowledge and perceptions. Svetlana has talked also quite a bit about methods, approaches, and techniques, and I just wanted to stress the importance of being very creative and just to understand how can I get best to what I need or want to know, to what I need and want to evaluate. And well, in Latin America, we have used quite a bit the popular education, which is yes, it's an educational approach, but the techniques, the workshop approaches, the building knowledge together focus has been very useful to address particular context and well, evaluation intentions. It is very important also to sometimes combine a comparative approach with group-specific methods and techniques like case studies and testimonies. And from my experience, and maybe it's the most regional approach or a Bolivian approach, it is that we tend to say that every group interview is a focus group. I think we have lost the technical and the specificities of focus groups, and it's important to acknowledge that not every group interview is a focus group, and that there are many alternatives like conversatories to bring people together to discuss a subject, to make a context analysis, to discuss a problematic. Well, mixed methods and mix the methods is very important, and it's not really the same. And really, I would like to stress the creative part of it. Participant observation, well, this is something I have to mention as an anthropologist. It is something very important and very powerful, but it is also very important that while we include it, we recognize our own approach, our own perceptions, and our own lens. And something that I would also like to stress is that we don't have to forget that methods, techniques, approaches are the means, not the ends. And sometimes I have felt that during evaluation processes, we are very concerned about following the activities or the methods and not really questioning whether these activities, these methods, these techniques are bringing us to the findings, to the evidence, to what we need to know. Another important part of an evaluation is about listening and analyzing, and it is very important to understand that some expressions can have different meanings in specific contexts. This is can be related to context relevant or let's say cultural sensitive evaluations, but it is really very, very important. We can hear the same words and may be very tempted to interpret them in the same with the same meaning, and this is very, very important to understand that meanings behind same words can be different, and also the other ways around. The different words can be expressing the same meanings. It is very important to listen openly and carefully, that not to limit yourself or your attention to get answers to your questions from interviews to dialogues. This is very something that I think is very important. It's not really having such a functional relation with your informants, but just being capable of opening dialogues where they can also make you questions, and where you might have the opportunity to discover things, very important things that are not that you didn't plan, that you didn't foresee, but that you, if you limit yourself to just your questions and to really ask the informants to concentrate on the answers to your questions, you might miss important pieces. Another important point is be aware that verbal communication only represents 7, or some people say 9% of communication. So this is linked also to observation and to your capacity to get a wider perception, a wider feeling of what women or men are trying to transmit, to express, and to say. This could be particularly important when we think about, you know, vulnerable women, vulnerable groups that we are interviewing, and maybe also on how do we address silence. It is also very important that we are open to new evidence-based analytical categories. There is not much time now, but there is, for example, grounded theory. Grounded theory says that you build theory based on data, and not that there's no pre-existing theory. So this is a very interesting approach to sometimes address, you know, new context, new theoretical frameworks that emerge from data. Voices are important, but silences are too. The challenge of interpreting silences, especially among marginalized groups, as I just said. And another final point about listening and analyzing is to motivate critical own interpretation and analysis among participants. Sometimes we tend to just focus on people as informants, not as analyzing actors, and not asking people how they interpret what they are saying or the data that is being gathered. So it is another role that we could see, a more empowered role of the actors in the field. Another very important step in an evaluation is the writing process, you know, and well, I think that it is very important that to recognize throughout the evaluation, even from the beginning, as I said, that we are biased and that we have our own lenses. So it is very important to make them explicit. I always say, okay, there is, for me, a false dilemma between subjectivity and objectivity. I think this is a false dilemma. As human beings, we are inevitably subjective beings, and that is not negative. And actually, I think that feminist evaluation has put subjectivity and power at the center of evaluation, and this is very important too. So not to negate, not to you know, be ashamed, or to not to recognize that the subjective part, and that we as evaluators, even if we are trying to really bring you know, good evidence to capture good data and information, etc., we are also subjective, and we are biased, and we see only a partial part of reality. This is related to the second part where we say, is the glass half empty or half full? The truth versus perspectives of reality. This is also a thing that has to do with this part of how we present the findings, how we see ourselves as powerful evaluators or empowering actors, which is I will talk a bit more in the second part of my presentation. And well, something very maybe simple, but not always done, even when this is established in the process, is to ask for feedback to your writing and to your reports. Sometimes, yes, we have reference groups during the evaluations, but well, sometimes the reference groups don't really work in all the stages, but also these are usually composed with not with some key people that might give you other inputs from, let's say, the participants of the evaluation. And just the second part that I will try to move a bit quickly also because of the time, it's like to think about some key challenging key challenges and key also dilemmas and hot issues in the evaluation, and just inviting you to challenge ourselves also and to be self-critical and to also think about us, our role as actors. And well, this is quite an old, let's say, slide that I have used for different presentations, but I like it, and so I bring it here just to make a warning or to make a point saying that what is important may be invisible to the eyes and to the evaluation. Just these pictures, you know, there are so many things going on there. Nothing, it's completely silent. It's a picture, but it is in a rural area in Bolivia during an evaluation. But there are so many things in terms of power relations going on, like subordination, exclusion, inequality, patriarchy, etc., etc. So I think as feminist evaluators or gender transformative evaluators, we have the challenge to address also these issues that involve us. It's like we are not outsiders in an evaluation process. We are part of the evaluation, and we will generate certain power dynamics too. So just a provocation, let's say, or an invitation for self-reflection. And here's some points. We see and evaluate through the eyes of our own history and environment. Our view of reality is always partial and slanted. We as evaluators represent power structures and relationships that can be expressed in subtle matters. Gender expertise does not necessarily challenge machismo and patriarchal relations. We are expected to be and know more than the others, and evaluator competences seldom include self-reflection and awareness around power issues. And well, in the last, let's say, year or year and a half, I have been strongly involved with an attempt to develop a competencies profile for gender transformative rights, etc., evaluators. And I think we have, I was really very happy to see that, for example, the Canadian Evaluation Society includes as a competency for evaluators a self-reflection. So I would like to stress that this is a very important part, well, mainly in the topic that we are now addressing, which is gender transformation or feminist evaluation. I already introduced the topic of ethics and ethical issues, and as I said, these issues are not explicitly considered or explicitly translated in the evaluation and the design. They just remain as, you know, nice words. Despite important good intentions, ethical norms frequently focus on normal compliance, are not contextualized, and do not address power relations. There is also a dilemma between cultural respect and ethical principles. For example, in terms of indigenous rights, indigenous collective rights, and individual women's rights, this is a particular issue or dilemma or tension in Bolivia. And I can tell you very shortly about an experience in terms of unethical ethics. There we wrote an article that is called exactly Unethical Ethics. It is linked to a research project, not exactly an evaluation, but it was very interesting because the pressure was to comply with some ethical norms and ethical protocol, which was New York institution that was asking for that protocol. And the women here came to a point, they were illiterate women, that they say, well, just go on, we'll just sign a blank sheet of paper. So the temptation was to just, to comply with the ethical requirement, to just let them sign a blank sheet of paper and really, get to a point where we just said, well, this is unethical ethics. There is also a dilemma between methodological effectiveness and ethical behavior in some issues, like, for example, when you use the hidden client, which is, I have seen it very used in health evaluations. So this can be very effective in terms of gathering very important information, but I think it has very ethical questionings which are very important. So this is a dilemma. Something that I like to discuss a lot, and this is a very, I would say, not a different, but a complementary perspective of what Svetlana has presented about indicators, is that what do we mean about measuring success, and that not everything that shines is gold. And I have some interesting cases, mainly in Bolivia, where actually the indicators were achieved, and that the projects or the programs, very big programs also, were evaluated as successful, but they didn't change really women's lives. And even further, there is an interesting case where the success of the project, and it is linked to bringing credit to rural areas, was conditioned to even going over and vulnerating women's rights. Because the focus was on allocating money, they had targets in allocating certain amounts, so they did everything to allocate the money without really observing women's rights or observing women empowerment. They looked for their husbands, they generated pressure of the women over the women. So these are certain contradictions that we need to just be aware of. Yes,
1 minute to go. Sorry to interrupt.
Just one thing that I would like to stress also is the concepts. Maybe, I don't know if it's a Southern thing, but for us, difference is not the same as inequality. So when we talk about differences between men and women, differences are nice, we are all different, but the problem is inequalities, and needs are not interests. And well, these are some conceptual issues. And also the issue of participation and the risk that this is a quote of somebody in a project that saying we will bring some of our women for the focus group. Just all these hidden power relations that may be very practical for the purpose of the evaluation. Yes, I want them to bring their women for my focus group, but what is behind? What are we really fostering? The same word as of beneficiaries, for us, it is a very paternalistic and very, I would say, anti-feminist concept. And that emphasizing participation of women is not enough. How are these women perceived? What is the role in their evaluation? Are they only key informants, or are they also actors, decision makers, owners? Will they be empowered to advocate? And also, the whole issue, which is a big discussion about valuing and retributing participation, and the whole concept about paying or not paying. I will just skip this slide. There is no such thing as a woman. We are women, we are diverse, and we are also, we can be very, very unequal. The myth of gender transformations and cultural respect. Gender transformations imply addressing power relations, and addressing power relations implies changing culture. So there is a thing that we are working on, which is like, how do we bring together, and what does it really imply in practice, gender transformative evaluations, which are context or cultural responsive. So just a final slide. So to challenge power structures, we need to be skeptical about success, go beyond the indicators, analyze the cost and effects of achievements, strategize and be creative to reach excluded groups, value internal criticism and dissidence, remember that others also play power games, dig for meaning, not for answers, observe more, address technical rigor from new perspectives. And just this final slide is the gender transformative approach is a holistic, ethical, technical, and political approach to evaluation and development. It embraces the potential for contribution to social change, but we must take the challenge and make it happen. Thank you very much.
It's been a very, very complete and comprehensive presentation. There's a lot of discussion going on, so we don't have any time now, but we're going to pass the questions to you in order to create this dialogue. I want to thank you all very much, and I just want to invite you all to stay tuned in our social media, in our networks, and please go to our post-webinar survey, and we'll stay tuned. And thank you so much. Let's get this conversation going on and rolling, because I think it's very important. This is the key question about having this joint effort between EvalYouth and EvalGender. And let's keep this conversation going on. Thank you so much for you all, and I appreciate your time. And sorry and apologize again for the delay, but we'll stay tuned. Thank you so much, you all.